The cowboy only meant to fake a marriage for protection. But the moment she reached for her suitcase to leave, he said something he never thought he'd say again. A gust of cold wind swept across the ridge as Savannah tightened her grip on the worn suitcase. Below them, the lights of Stone Creek flickered through the darkness. Wyatt's hand caught the ranch gate before it could swing open. Somewhere in the distance, a horse whinnied. Neither moved. Neither looked away. Then he spoke, and the look on his face made her forget the road waiting behind her. What could make a man who trusted no one stand in her way now? If you enjoy heartfelt Western love stories, let me know where you're watching from and join me for this journey. The stagecoach rolled into Stone Creek just after noon. Dust followed it like a second passenger. Savannah Reed stepped down carefully, one hand on the rail, the other gripping a worn brown suitcase whose leather corners had long since cracked. The Wyoming wind caught the edge of her coat the moment her boots touched the ground. For a few seconds, she simply stood there. Red Canyon Valley stretched beyond the town. Sunlit cliffs rose in the distance. Cattle moved like dark specks across yellow grass. A line of cottonwoods followed the creek southward. It was beautiful, and it was completely unfamiliar. Savannah reached into her coat pocket and counted her money for the third time that morning. $1.38. That was everything. She slid the coins back into her pocket and lifted her chin. It would have to be enough. The freight office sat near the center of town, beside the largest warehouse in Stone Creek. Wagons loaded with crates stood outside. Men carried ledgers in and out through wide wooden doors. Work. That was all she needed. Work and a chance. Inside, the office smelled of paper, lamp oil, and fresh-cut pine. A clerk glanced up. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for employment." The man hesitated, then pointed toward a glass office at the back. "Mr. Crow handles hiring." Savannah thanked him and walked toward the door. Harlan Crow looked exactly like the kind of man who owned half a town. Expensive vest, gold watch chain, polished boots, a smile that never reached his eyes. He looked her over before she even sat down. "You came alone?" "Yes." "From Missouri?" "Yes." His gaze lingered a little too long. Savannah felt it immediately. She had met men like him before, men who treated every conversation like a transaction. Crow leaned back. "You have bookkeeping experience?" "I managed freight records for 3 years. Can you balance accounts?" "Yes." He nodded slowly. "Then you're exactly what I need." Relief almost reached her face. Almost, because Crow was still smiling. And there was something wrong with that smile. He rose from his chair and moved around the desk. Too close. Savannah stood immediately. The room suddenly felt smaller. "I can offer you a room upstairs," Crow said, his voice lowered. "Private meals, better wages than anyone else in town." Savannah didn't answer. Crow stepped closer. "You'd only need to be agreeable." There it was, the thing hidden beneath every word. Savannah grabbed her suitcase. "I'm not interested." Crow's smile faded. "Think carefully." "I have." She moved toward the door. His hand caught her wrist. "Not hard. Not yet. But enough." The office became very quiet. Savannah looked down at his fingers, then back at his face with, "Let go." His jaw tightened. "You don't seem to understand how things work in Stone Creek." "I understand perfectly." "Then act like it." His grip tightened. That was his mistake. Savannah had spent too many years surviving men who thought power belonged to them. She twisted free. Crow reached again. This time she knocked his hand away, hard. The movement sent him stumbling backward. One of the gold buttons on his coat tore loose. It bounced once across the floor, then rolled through the open doorway, straight onto Main Street. Silence. Several people outside stopped walking. A woman carrying fabric froze. A blacksmith looked up from his anvil. Two cowboys near the saloon turned their heads. The button settled in the dust. Crow stared at it, then at Savannah. His face darkened. The embarrassment hit him harder than any punch could have. She picked up her suitcase. "You should learn to take no for an answer," gasps spread through the street. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Crow's voice came low and cold. "You'll regret this." Savannah walked past him. "You aren't the first man to say that." The crowd parted as she crossed the street. Eyes followed her everywhere. Whispers began almost immediately. By evening, the entire town knew. Stone Creek was small enough for bad news to travel faster than a horse. Every door she knocked on afterward stayed closed. The diner needed help. Not anymore. The mercantile needed bookkeeping. Not anymore. The boarding house had a vacancy. Not anymore. Each rejection came a little faster than the last. By sunset, Savannah stopped asking. The sky turned orange over the canyon walls. She sat beside the horse trough near the livery stable. A wagon rattled somewhere in the distance. A dog barked once. The town settled into evening. Savannah stared at the water. She was tired. Not physically. She knew how to survive hunger. She knew how to survive uncertainty. What exhausted her was starting over. Again. Missouri, Kansas, Cheyenne. Now here, always another town, always another beginning. She rubbed her thumb across the handle of her suitcase. Then she heard boots. Slow, measured, not hurrying. A shadow stretched across the trough. That was a dangerous thing you did. Savannah looked up. The man standing there was tall, broad shoulders, weathered hat, dust-covered coat, the kind of face shaped by years outdoors. Nothing about him seemed rushed. Not his posture, not his expression, not even his breathing. "I've had worse afternoons," Savannah said. The corner of his mouth almost moved. Almost. He glanced toward Main Street, then back at her. "If you stay in this town tonight, Crow will come after you." Savannah studied him. "You know that for certain?" "Yes." "How?" "Because I know Harland Crow." The answer came without hesitation. That somehow made it more believable. She looked away. "I'll leave in the morning. He won't wait until morning." The wind pushed dust across the road. The stranger remained exactly where he was. Still, patient, as if he had all the time in the world. Finally, he spoke again. "My name is Wyatt Boone." The name meant nothing to her. Yet. "I own Silver Ridge Ranch." Savannah said nothing. "I need someone who can keep books." Now she looked at him. "You need a bookkeeper." "I do." "And that's all?" "That's all." No smile, no hidden meaning, no bargaining. Just facts. It was strange enough to make her suspicious. "You don't know me." "No." "You don't know whether I'm honest." Wyatt looked toward the freight office, toward Crow's warehouse, then back at her. "I know enough." The silence stretched. The evening light faded another shade darker. Finally, Savannah stood. "If this turns into another conversation like the one I had today, it won't." The answer came immediately. Not defensive, certain. Something in that certainty settled a small part of her she hadn't realized was still braced for impact. Wyatt reached for her suitcase. She hesitated, then let him take it. They walked toward a wagon parked near the livery. Neither spoke much. The horses shifted impatiently. Leather creaked. The smell of hay drifted from the stable. Savannah climbed aboard. Wyatt took the driver's seat. Stone Creek slowly disappeared behind them as the wagon rolled north. The last light of day painted the canyon walls red. For the first time since arriving, Savannah allowed herself to believe she might have found a place to start again. Then she looked back. Near the center of town, two riders were moving quickly from building to building. One stopped outside the boarding house. The other entered the diner. Searching. Looking. Even from a distance, she recognized one of them as a man who had stood beside Crow earlier that afternoon. Her stomach tightened. The riders continued their search. Door after door, question after question, looking for someone, looking for her. Savannah slowly turned back toward the road ahead. The ranch owner beside her said nothing. Neither did she. But the Wyoming evening suddenly felt much colder, because she understood something now. Harland Crow had not simply been embarrassed. He was angry. And men like Harland Crow rarely stopped after one refusal. The wagon rolled deeper into the fading light. Behind them, Stone Creek disappeared into darkness. Ahead waited Silver Ridge Ranch, and whatever trouble had already started following her there. The wagon rolled through the ranch gate just after sunrise. Savannah had dozed off sometime before dawn. When she opened her eyes, the world looked different. The land stretched wide beneath a pale Wyoming sky. Frost clung to patches of grass near the creek. A herd of cattle moved slowly across a distant pasture. The mountains of Wind Hollow stood dark against the morning light. Silver Ridge Ranch sat at the center of it all. Not grand, not fancy, just solid. A two-story ranch house stood near a red barn. Several smaller buildings sat nearby. Corrals lined the western side of the property. Smoke drifted from a chimney. The place looked lived in, worked in, earned. Wyatt pulled the wagon to a stop. The front door opened. An older man stepped outside first. Gray beard, weathered face. The look of someone who had spent 50 years outdoors and had opinions about nearly everything. "You're late," he called. "No," Wyatt replied. "You're early." The older man grunted. A woman appeared behind him carrying a coffee pot. "Ignore him," she said. "He's been grumpy since breakfast." "I haven't had breakfast." "Exactly." The woman smiled toward Savannah. "Well now, you must be Miss Reed." Savannah climbed down from the wagon. "Yes, ma'am. I'm Mabel Dixon." She pointed at the older man. "And that's Earl. Don't let him fool you. Half the ranch runs because I tell him what to do." Earl rolled his eyes. "Morning, Miss Reed." Something inside Savannah loosened, only slightly. But enough. Nobody stared. Nobody whispered. Nobody looked at her the way people in Stone Creek had. They simply welcomed her. Mabel showed her to a small room on the second floor. A quilt covered the bed. A pitcher of water sat on a washstand. A tiny vase held 3 dried wildflowers. The room wasn't large, but it was clean. And for the first time in months, it felt safe. At least for the moment. By afternoon, Savannah sat at a desk in the ranch office. Ledgers covered nearly every shelf. Receipts were stacked in neat piles. She opened the first book, then the second, then the third. An hour later, she frowned. 2 hours later, she frowned harder. By evening, she carried 3 ledgers into the kitchen where Wyatt sat drinking coffee. He looked up. "What is it?" Savannah placed the books on the table. "Your taxes." Wyatt glanced down. "What about them?" You're paying nearly double what you paid 3 years ago. He leaned forward. Savannah opened the ledger. These increases aren't normal. Wyatt studied the figures. I assumed county rates changed. They did. She pointed. But not this much. The kitchen grew quiet. Mabel stopped drying dishes. Earl looked over from the stove. Savannah turned several pages. Someone has reassessed portions of your property multiple times. Can they do that? Earl asked. They can. She tapped a receipt. But not without records. Wyatt's eyes narrowed. Meaning? Meaning someone wants this ranch under financial pressure. Nobody spoke for several seconds. The only sound came from the clock on the wall. Tick, tick, tick. Finally, Wyatt closed the ledger. I'll look into it. Savannah nodded, but she could already see the concern in his eyes. The next week settled into a rhythm. Mornings began before sunrise. Coffee, ledgers, breakfast, the steady sounds of ranch life. Savannah found herself liking the routine. The ranch hands treated her with respect. Mabel checked on her without hovering. Earl complained constantly, but somehow made everyone laugh. And Wyatt? Wyatt remained difficult to understand. He wasn't unfriendly, just quiet. Sometimes she would look up from the books and find him standing outside staring toward the mountains, thinking, always thinking. Then there were the visits. The first happened 4 days later. A rider appeared at the gate near noon. Deputy Nolan Crow, Harlan Crow's younger brother. He looked enough like his brother to make Savannah uncomfortable immediately. Nolan smiled too much. Just like Harlan. I'm conducting routine business, he announced. Nobody believed him, especially not Wyatt. The deputy walked around the property, asked questions, looked into buildings, studied Savannah whenever he thought she wasn't paying attention. Before leaving, he tipped his hat. Good to see you've settled in, Miss Reed. Savannah said nothing. Nolan rode away smiling. The second visit came 3 days later. The third visit came 2 days after that. Each time he stayed longer. Each time he asked more questions. One evening a storm rolled down from the mountains. Rain hammered the roof. Wind rattled the windows. Most of the ranch hands had already gone to bed. Savannah sat at the kitchen table reviewing invoices by lantern light. The front door opened. Wyatt entered carrying a folded paper. His coat was soaked. Rain dripped onto the floorboards. Something about his face made Savannah set down her pen. What happened? He unfolded the document. The paper was damp. Official county stamps marked the bottom. Savannah read quickly, then read it again. A complaint, filed through county channels, questioning her background, questioning her employment, questioning her right to remain at Silver Ridge. Harlan Crow's name appeared nowhere on the page, but his fingerprints were all over it. They're trying to remove me. Yes. The rain pounded harder. Savannah stared at the paper. I'm sorry. Wyatt looked at her. For what? For bringing this trouble here. He said nothing. The silence stretched. Then he pulled out a chair and sat across from her. The lantern light flickered between them. Rainwater dripped from his coat onto the floor. Finally he spoke. I've been thinking. That didn't sound promising. Savannah folded the document. What kind of thinking? The kind that usually becomes a bad idea. Earl's voice floated from the next room. Then it's definitely a Boone family tradition. Nobody laughed. Wyatt kept his eyes on Savannah. Then he said it. Simple. Direct. The way he said everything. Pretend to be my wife. Savannah blinked, The room seemed to stop moving. Even the rain sounded farther away. What? If you're my wife, Crow can't remove you through county pressure. She stared. Wyatt continued. He can spread rumors. He's already doing that. He can file complaints. He already has. A pause. But it becomes much harder if you're legally connected to this ranch. Savannah looked down at the document, then back at him. You want a fake marriage. I want Crow to lose leverage. The lantern crackled softly. Outside, thunder rolled across the valley. Neither moved. Neither looked away. Finally, Savannah asked the question sitting between them. Why would you do that for me? Something shifted in Wyatt's expression. Gone almost immediately. I don't like bullies. Savannah almost smiled. Almost. That answer wasn't the whole truth, but it was enough for now. The rain continued falling. The decision settled between them. Heavy. Unexpected. Real. At last, Savannah nodded. All right? Wyatt exhaled slowly. Not relief, more like acceptance. The kind a man showed after making a difficult choice. They spent the next several days preparing paperwork. County forms, witness signatures, property records. Simple things, practical things. At least they tried to treat them that way. One afternoon, Savannah entered the office looking for a blank ledger. A small wooden box sat open on Wyatt's desk. She hadn't seen it before. Inside was an old photograph. A young woman, beautiful, smiling. The image had faded with age. Savannah picked it up carefully. Then she turned it over. 2 words were written on the back. The handwriting was unmistakably Wyatt's. Never again. The floor creaked behind her. Savannah turned. Wyatt stood in the doorway. Neither spoke. For a moment the room felt very small. Then Wyatt stepped forward, took the photograph, closed the box, and set it back inside the desk drawer. The drawer shut with a quiet click. Savannah didn't ask. Wyatt didn't explain. But as she watched him walk away, she understood one thing clearly. The fake marriage wasn't the only difficult thing Wyatt Boone was agreeing to. Somewhere in his past was a wound that still hadn't healed, and somehow, without meaning to, she had just seen the edge of it. The marriage took place 6 days later. There was no church ceremony, no flowers, no music, just a county clerk in Stone Creek, 2 signatures in a ledger, and Earl Dixon serving as witness because he happened to be standing closest to the door. The clerk adjusted his spectacles and pushed the book toward them. Sign here. Savannah picked up the pen first. The ink scratched softly across the page. Savannah Reed. For a moment she stared at the name. Then she handed the pen to Wyatt. His handwriting was steady, deliberate. Wyatt Boone. The clerk stamped the paper. The sound echoed through the small office. Just like that, it was done. When they stepped back onto Main Street, the town was already watching. A woman outside the mercantile nearly dropped her basket. 2 men leaving the barber shop stopped talking. Across the street, somebody hurried away in a direction that almost certainly led toward Harland Crow. News traveled fast. By supper, everyone in Stone Creek knew. By morning, half the county probably did. The ride back to Silver Ridge felt quieter than usual. Not uncomfortable, just different. Savannah sat beside Wyatt on the wagon seat. The marriage certificate rested inside a leather folder between them. Neither mentioned it. Neither seemed entirely sure what should be said. Wind moved through the grass. A hawk circled high above the valley. Finally, Wyatt cleared his throat. You don't have to change anything. Savannah glanced at him. What? The room upstairs stays yours. A pause. The job stays yours. Another pause. You don't owe me anything. Savannah looked forward again. Neither do you. For some reason, that seemed to make him relax slightly. The ranch changed after that, not all at once. Little things. The sort people noticed only after they had happened. The house no longer felt empty. Savannah started baking bread every Sunday morning. The smell drifted through the entire ranch before sunrise. Mabel claimed it improved everyone's mood. Earl claimed it improved his appetite. Neither statement was wrong. The kitchen became brighter. The dining table stayed occupied longer after meals. Sometimes Wyatt lingered with a second cup of coffee. Sometimes even a third. One evening, Savannah looked up from the accounts and found him sitting quietly by the window watching rain move across the pasture. Neither of them spoke for nearly 10 minutes. Strangely, it didn't feel awkward. The silence felt earned. Safe. A week later, she realized Wyatt had started returning to the house before dark whenever possible. Not every day, but often enough to notice. At supper, there was conversation now. Stories, laughter, the occasional argument over cattle prices, and every night, a lamp remained burning in the front window until everyone had returned safely. The house felt warmer, more alive. Earl noticed first. Of course he did. One evening, he sat on the porch sharpening a pocket knife. Savannah stepped outside carrying 2 coffee cups. The sunset painted the canyon walls gold. Earl accepted the cup. House feels different. Savannah sat beside him. How so? Used to feel like a place where people slept. He nodded toward the front door. Now it feels like a home. Savannah looked out across the valley. The ranch house windows glowed softly behind them. She didn't answer. Earl smiled into his coffee. That's answer enough. The trouble arrived 3 days later. A rider came into town from Missouri. Word reached Silver Ridge before sunset. Mabel heard it first at the general store. By supper, everyone knew the name. Silas Grant. Savannah went very still. The spoon in her hand stopped halfway to the stew pot. Wyatt noticed immediately. Who is he? She looked down at the table. For a moment, she seemed somewhere else. Far away. Missouri. Another life. Another disaster. My former employer. Nobody spoke. Earl set down his fork. What does he want? Savannah gave a short laugh that carried no humor. Nothing good. The next morning, Stone Creek exploded with rumors. Silas spent hours in the saloon, hours more in Crow's office. Then he started talking. Everywhere. To everyone. According to Silas Grant, Savannah Reed was a thief, a liar, a woman who had stolen company funds before fleeing Missouri. The story spread like wildfire through dry grass. By the end of the week, even people who barely knew her were repeating it. The worst part wasn't the rumors. It was the doubt, the small looks, the hesitation, the questions left unasked. Savannah felt them every time she entered town, every time a conversation stopped when she walked by. One afternoon, she stood outside the mercantile while 2 women whispered nearby. Neither intended for her to hear. She heard every word anyway. That night, she packed her suitcase. Not much. A few dresses, 2 books, her accounting records. The same belongings she had carried into Stone Creek. The same belongings she could carry out. The moon hung low above the ranch. Most of the house had gone quiet. Savannah slipped through the front door without waking anyone. Or so she thought. The barn stood dark except for a single lantern. She crossed the yard, reached the gate, and stopped. A hand rested on the wooden post. Wyatt. He stood beside the gate as if he'd been there for hours. Maybe he had. Neither spoke. The night wind moved through the cottonwoods. Finally, Savannah tightened her grip on the suitcase. You should have stayed inside. So should you. She almost smiled. Almost. Then it faded. Silas won't stop. No. He'll keep talking. Probably. People will believe him. Wyatt looked toward the dark pasture, then back at her. Some will. Savannah swallowed. The words felt heavier now. I'm bringing trouble to this ranch. No. His answer came instantly. She stared at him. You didn't hear what he said? I heard. You don't know what people are starting to think. I know exactly what they're thinking. The gate creaked softly in the wind. Savannah looked away first. I don't want Silver Ridge paying the price for me. The silence stretched. Then Wyatt stepped forward. Just one step. Enough. Not threatening. Not forceful. Certain. I'm tired of watching good people leave. The words landed softly, yet somehow harder than anything else he could have said. Savannah looked at him. Really looked at him. The moonlight caught the lines around his eyes, the weariness there, the honesty. No speeches, no promises. Just a simple truth spoken by a man who rarely wasted words. For the first time since arriving in Wyoming, Savannah didn't know what to say. Her fingers loosened slightly around the suitcase handle. Neither moved. Neither rushed the moment. Somewhere beyond the ranch, a coyote called into the darkness. Eventually, Wyatt reached for the suitcase, not taking it away, just holding the other handle, waiting, giving her a choice. Savannah looked down at their hands, then slowly released hers. Together they walked back toward the house. The lamp in the front window was still burning, waiting. Just before they reached the porch, Wyatt spoke, his voice barely above a murmur. You're not the reason this place is under attack. Savannah looked at him. What do you mean? Something unreadable crossed his face, then disappeared. Harlan Crow wanted this ranch long before you arrived. That stopped her cold. Before she could ask another question, Wyatt looked toward the road leading south. His expression hardened, far away. A rider moved beneath the moonlight, heading toward Stone Creek, toward Crow, toward whatever came next. And the next morning, the town woke to a new rumor. According to Silas Grant, a witness was already traveling west from Missouri. A witness who could prove everything. A witness who could destroy Savannah Reed once and for all. This time, even Wyatt looked concerned. And for the first time since their marriage began, Savannah felt something deeper than fear. Because whatever was coming wasn't aimed only at her anymore. It was coming for both of them. The first snow arrived early that year. Not enough to cover the valley. Just enough to dust the peaks above Wind Hollow and leave a thin white edge along the highest ridges. Savannah stood on the porch with a cup of coffee warming her hands. The air smelled like cold pine and wood smoke. Below her, ranch hands moved cattle toward lower pasture before winter settled in for good. Silver Ridge looked peaceful. It wasn't. The lawsuit arrived 3 days later. Nolan Crow delivered it personally. He rode through the front gate just after noon. Deputy badge shining, expression smug. Wyatt met him on the porch. Savannah watched through the front window. Nolan handed over folded documents. You've been served. Wyatt unfolded the papers. Read them once. Then again. His jaw tightened. Nothing else. What is it? Savannah asked after Nolan rode away. Wyatt handed her the pages. The lawsuit claimed Silver Ridge had illegally expanded its eastern boundary, claimed the water spring beneath Wind Hollow belonged to Harlan Crow, claimed Wyatt had no lawful right to use it. Savannah looked up. This isn't about me. No. It's about the water. Wyatt nodded. Always was. The realization settled heavily between them. Everything Crow had done. The rumors, the threats, Silas Grant, the fake concern. It had never been about Savannah alone. She had simply become another tool, another weapon, another pressure point. That night, neither of them slept much. Rain tapped softly against the windows. Wind rattled the barn doors. At dawn, Savannah found Wyatt already awake. Ledgers covered the dining table. Tax records, property maps, water permits, receipts older than some of the ranch hands. He looked exhausted. She poured coffee into his mug anyway. He accepted it without looking up. 5 minutes later, he finally spoke. The original survey records are missing. Savannah froze. Missing? They should be here. His finger tapped an empty space inside a folder. They aren't. The room grew very quiet. Someone had removed them, or hidden them. Neither possibility was good. The search began immediately. For 3 days they dug through every drawer, shelf, cabinet, and storage room inside the ranch house. Nothing. Then Mabel remembered something. An abandoned freight office, 20 miles south, near an old stage stop that closed years earlier. A former transportation clerk had lived there before dying during a winter fever outbreak. Savannah's attention sharpened immediately. Transportation, shipping, records, Missouri. The pieces felt connected somehow. On the 4th morning, she rode out alone. The abandoned building sat beside a dry creek bed, half collapsed, windows broken, roof sagging, dust covered everything. She almost turned back. Then she noticed a trap door beneath a fallen desk. The hinges groaned when she pulled it open. A narrow storage space waited below. Dark, undisturbed. Inside sat a single trunk. Old, heavy, locked. The lock broke easily. Savannah lifted the lid, then stopped breathing. Ledgers, dozens of them, invoices, freight manifests, shipping contracts. Letters tied together with fading ribbon. She sat cross-legged in the dust and began reading. Hour after hour, page after page. The truth slowly emerged. Harland Crow's name appeared repeatedly. Not recently. Years ago. Long before Stone Creek. Long before Wyoming. Business partnerships, transportation contracts, missing funds, false invoices. The exact scheme that had destroyed Savannah's reputation in Missouri. Her pulse quickened. By sunset, she carried the trunk back to Silver Ridge. Wyatt was waiting in the yard. The moment he saw her expression, he knew. You found something. Savannah nodded. More than something. The dining table disappeared beneath documents. Earl arrived. Mabel arrived. Even Wyatt looked stunned. Every ledger pointed in the same direction. Crow had been running financial fraud schemes across several territories for years. Whenever money disappeared, someone else took the blame. Savannah had simply been one victim among many. For the first time since Missouri, she held proof. Actual proof. Not memories, not explanations. Evidence. Late that evening, another rider appeared. A woman, traveling alone, wrapped in a dark coat coated with road dust. She introduced herself quietly. Ruth Grant. Silence filled the room. Savannah recognized the name instantly. Silas Grant's wife. Ruth looked older than her years. The sort of woman who had carried burdens too long. She removed a bundle of letters from her satchel, placed them carefully on the table. I should have come sooner. Nobody spoke. Ruth's eyes settled on Savannah. I knew what happened. The words landed heavily. I knew years ago. Savannah felt something tighten in her chest. Ruth continued. My husband wasn't innocent. Her voice shook only once. He helped bury the truth. She looked down at the letters. These are the originals. Savannah slowly opened the bundle. More correspondence. More signatures. More transactions. Every road led back to Harland Crow. Every lie. Every stolen dollar. Every ruined reputation. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Wyatt quietly reached across the table, not touching Savannah, not interrupting, simply sliding one of the letters closer to her so she could read it easier. The gesture was small, almost invisible, yet somehow it steadied her. Ruth watched the exchange. Something softened in her face. You believe her? Wyatt didn't hesitate. Yes. No speeches. No explanation. Just one word. The room fell silent again. Outside, wind pushed through the cottonwoods. Inside, years of lies were finally beginning to crack. Then a sound echoed across the yard. Shouting. Earl reached the window first. His face changed instantly. Wyatt. Everyone stood. Orange light flickered against the glass. Far too bright. Far too fast. The storage barn. The one holding duplicate ranch records. It was burning. Flames climbed into the night sky. Men ran across the yard. Buckets appeared. Horses screamed from nearby corrals. Smoke rolled upward into the darkness. Wyatt was already moving. Earl behind him. The ranch hands close behind. Savannah stood frozen for half a second. Then she saw the trunk. The letters. The proof. Everything they had just found. Everything Crow wanted destroyed. And suddenly she understood. This fire wasn't an accident. Someone knew. Someone had discovered Ruth arrived. Someone knew the evidence existed. Outside, sparks swirled into the Wyoming night like burning stars. Inside the ranch house, Savannah gripped the edge of the table, watching flames consume the darkness beyond the window. And for the first time since coming to Silver Ridge, she wondered if Harland Crow had become desperate enough to risk everything. Because desperate men were often the most dangerous, and the fire was still growing. The barn roof collapsed just after midnight. A shower of sparks rose into the cold Wyoming sky. For a moment, it looked as though the stars themselves had caught fire. Savannah stood beside Mabel near the house porch, her coat pulled tightly around her shoulders. The air smelled of smoke and wet earth. Men shouted. Buckets passed from hand to hand. Horses stamped nervously inside nearby corrals. Wyatt moved through the chaos with calm efficiency, not wasting motion, not wasting words, the same way he handled everything. By dawn, the fire was finally out. The barn was gone. Nothing remained except blackened beams and drifting smoke. Earl kicked through the ashes with a boot. We saved most of it. Savannah looked up sharply. What? Earl pointed toward the main house. The trunk. Relief nearly buckled her knees. The letters, the ledgers, the invoices. Every piece of evidence had been moved from the dining room before the fire spread. Crow had destroyed a building, but not the truth. 3 days later, Stone Creek filled with wagons. Judge Walter Mercer arrived from Cheyenne shortly after sunrise. The hearing would be held inside the town assembly hall. By 8 o'clock, every seat was occupied. Ranchers, merchants, cowboys, families. Everyone wanted to see how the fight would end. Harland Crow arrived dressed in his finest black coat. His confidence looked forced now, thinner somehow, like a man trying to hold together something already breaking apart. Nolan sat beside him. Silas Grant sat one row behind, avoiding eye contact with everyone. Savannah felt Wyatt beside her. Steady, quiet, present. She hadn't realized how much comfort there was in simply having him nearby. The hearing began. Crow's lawyer spoke first. Long arguments, boundary lines, water rights, technical language, complicated maps. Judge Mercer listened patiently. Then Savannah's evidence was presented. One ledger, then another, then another. Each document connected to the next. A pattern. A scheme. Years of deception laid out piece by piece. The room grew quieter with every page. Then Ruth Grant stood. The silence became complete. She walked to the front carrying a small leather satchel. No hesitation. No fear visible now. Only certainty. I was there. Her voice carried through the hall. Every person heard it. She explained the letters, the payments, the lies. She described how Silas had helped conceal the fraud, how Crow had manipulated records across multiple territories, how Savannah had been blamed for crimes she never committed. Silas lowered his head. He didn't interrupt, didn't argue, didn't even try. The fight had already left him. The final blow came when Ruth produced the original correspondence. Crow's signature, his instructions, his payments, his plan. Everything. Judge Mercer studied the evidence for a long time. Then he closed the folder. The sound echoed through the room. His ruling lasted less than 10 minutes. Crow's lawsuit was dismissed. Silver Ridge retained its water rights. A formal criminal investigation would begin immediately. Nolan Crow was suspended from his position. Harland Crow would face charges related to fraud and bribery. The room erupted. Not cheering, just noise, relief, shock, conversations exploding all at once. Harland Crow remained seated. For the first time since Savannah had met him, he looked small, very small. Wyatt never said a word. He simply reached for Savannah's hand beneath the table, held it once, then let go. The gesture lasted only seconds, yet she felt it all afternoon. The ride home was quiet, not because anything was wrong, because neither of them quite knew what came next. The fight was over. The danger was gone. The agreement remained, and that was somehow harder. Late that evening, they stopped at an overlook above Red Canyon Valley. The entire valley stretched beneath them. Golden grass, dark pines, Silver Ridge Ranch in the distance. Home. Neither moved for a while. Wind whispered through the rocks. The world felt strangely still. Savannah finally spoke. It's over. Yeah. She looked down toward the ranch. No more lawsuits. No. No more pretending. That one hung between them. Wyatt didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a photograph. The same photograph Savannah had once seen hidden inside the wooden box. The woman from his past. The woman who had left. For a long moment he studied it. Then he released it. The wind caught the photograph instantly, carried it out over the canyon. Gone. Savannah watched until she couldn't see it anymore. Wyatt stared toward the horizon. When she left, I made myself a promise. His voice sounded rougher than usual. I told myself nobody would ever get that close again. Savannah remained silent, letting him continue. I spent 11 years keeping that promise. A faint smile appeared. Tired, honest. Turns out I wasn't very good at it. The wind tugged softly at her hair. She looked at him, really looked at him. Not the ranch owner, not the protector, not the man who stood against Crow. Just Wyatt. You never seemed bad at anything. He laughed quietly. A rare sound. You broke my only rule. the words settled between them. Simple. Unadorned. Completely true. Savannah felt her throat tighten. Not from sadness, not from relief. Something deeper. Something that had been growing since the water trough in Stone Creek, since the wagon ride, since the kitchen, since all the moments neither of them had named. She stepped closer. Neither rushed, neither looked away. The distance disappeared naturally, like it had always been heading toward this. Their first kiss wasn't dramatic. It wasn't desperate. It wasn't about winning or surviving. It was about choosing. The same choice both had been making for weeks without admitting it. When they finally pulled apart, neither said anything. They didn't need to. The valley below glowed beneath the last light of day. And somehow everything felt different. 1 year later, Silver Ridge Ranch was thriving. The water rights remained secure. The cattle herds had doubled. The old schoolhouse beside the church opened every Monday morning. Savannah taught reading and arithmetic there. Children filled the room with noise and questions. Wyatt still rode the range before sunrise, still checked fences, still fixed broken gates himself when he could. Some habits never changed. Every evening he returned home along the same road, and every evening a lamp glowed in the front window. Waiting. The people of Stone Creek told the story for years afterward. About the woman who arrived with a worn suitcase and almost no money. About the powerful man who tried to break her. About the cowboy who offered protection and found something far more valuable. Most people remembered the courtroom. Others remembered the fire. Some remembered the marriage. But the people who knew the whole story always said the same thing. Savannah Reed didn't change Silver Ridge because she was lucky. She changed it because she refused to bow when bowing would have been easier. And in the end, courage accomplished something no lawsuit, no threat, and no amount of money ever could. It broke the only rule Wyatt Boone had managed to keep for 11 years, and neither of them ever regretted it. Sometimes I think that's what stayed with me most about their story. Not the courtroom, not the fire, not even the fight that saved the ranch. It was the moment two people finally stopped carrying their burdens alone. If you place yourself where Savannah once stood, arriving in a strange town with almost nothing, carrying old wounds nobody could see, you realize how easy it would have been to stop trusting, to keep your heart locked away, to believe survival was enough. And if you place yourself where Wyatt stood, after years of disappointment and silence, you understand how tempting it is to build walls so strong that nobody can ever hurt you again. But life has a strange way of testing the promises we make to protect ourselves. Sometimes healing doesn't arrive with grand speeches or dramatic moments. Sometimes it arrives quietly, in a porch light left burning after dark, in a cup of coffee waiting on the table, in someone choosing to stay when leaving would be easier. Maybe that's the lesson hidden inside this old Wyoming story. The strongest people aren't always the ones who never get hurt. Sometimes they're the ones brave enough to trust again. I'd love to know what part of Savannah and Wyatt's journey stayed with you the most. Share it in the comments below. And if stories of courage, second chances, and unexpected love feel a little like home to you, I hope you'll join us again. There are still many dusty roads, forgotten secrets, and healing hearts waiting just beyond the next story.